At a time when the federal government is rolling back on trans health, it's becoming harder than ever to access even basic information about trans and non-binary health needs. So there's this new book that's centered around bodily autonomy for queer and trans people. And I'm talking to the author, Jacob, today. Enjoy. All right, I'm here with Jacob Engelsman, who is an international board-certified lactation consultant, infant care specialist, speaker, and writer. He's the author of Lactation for the Rest of Us, a guide for queer and trans parents and helpers. Hi, Jacob.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I mean, my pleasure. I feel like you have so much wisdom to offer.
Thank you.
So how do you identify? My audience is primarily queer, so just wondering if you're in the community.
Yeah. So I am a cis queer man. I really like the word queer. I feel like it's a good just kind of covers all the bases.
Yeah, it is kind of an umbrella term and it can mean so many different things. It feels comfortable to me, but also it's nice that we sort of reclaimed the word because it used to be a derogatory thing. I don't know when that was, maybe in the 70s or 80s or something. But now it's like we reclaimed it. It's a powerful word.
Absolutely.
So I have a bunch of questions for you.
Yeah.
Why did you write this book in the first place?
Okay. Yeah. Good question. So I knew that I wanted to work in infant care and particularly very small babies. That's always been kind of my jam, right? I love hanging out with babies. We've always gotten along. When I was younger, I got a job in food service, and so I just kind of always did that and fell into that. But I knew that deep down inside, I really wanted to take care of babies. Also, I knew that I did not want to go to med school, right? I'm not trying to be a pediatrician. That is not my jam. So this is, very long story short. My husband finishes grad school, gets a job working in a university as a librarian, which was the ultimate plan. We kind of took a step back and we're like, all right, so what does Jacob want to do with his life, right? Now that we've got his career sorted out, and I was happy enough working in food service and learning and doing those things, but I knew it wasn't what I really wanted to do. So like I said, I knew I wanted to take care of babies. So I learned about a job called a postpartum doula, and I felt like that was the job that I wanted. So I did a postpartum doula training. And what that is, for people who don't know, a doula is a person who, people define it in many different ways. So I feel like no matter what I say, somebody's going to be like, well, actually. But a doula is like a birth worker, but they don't deliver babies, right? They help the parents, they guide the parents through labor and delivery, as opposed to a midwife who does deliver babies, is a medical professional. I've heard people describe doulas in both a complimentary and a pejorative way, using the exact same phrase, which is a doula's like a wedding planner for your birth. And some people say that they're a wedding planner for your birth. And some people are they're like a wedding planner for your birth. It's great. So I did a postpartum doula training, a birth doula training. I attended my friend's birth. And I realized that's kind of not really what I wanted to do. That's more like caring for parents, like I said, and less caring for babies. But I had my foot in the door in the Asheville birth worker community, infant care community, lactation community. And so I got a position working as a secretary for a lactation clinic called Breastfeed Atlanta. I wasn't doing any medical support yet, but I was scheduling consultations, arguing with insurance companies, and cleaning breast pump rentals were the three big parts of my job. But after a few months, the owner of the clinic was like, Jacob, you should just get certified as a lactation consultant, you're here all the time anyway. Like you're clearly into the work, and even if you don't end up working in lactation, right, having the certification on your resume is not, going to be bad. It's only going to be a boon. And that whole process takes a few years. So I went through that, got my international board certified lactation consultant certification. While I was doing that, there's a lot of like lactation specific education that you have to do in addition to like other clinical hours and like college credits that kind of are more like general, anatomy, biology, that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of lactation specific education you need. And what I realized while I was doing that was that on the one hand, there's all of this information that would be extremely beneficial, will be extremely beneficial to queer and trans families, to gender diverse families. And the information is out there, but it's not in a place where parents can readily find it, right? Parents-to-be aren't reading the medical journals on lactation. And a lot of the books the information is in is written for lactation professionals, not for parents. And where it is written for parents, for example, information on inducing lactation, that sort of thing, it's always written assuming that the parents are a cis woman who just gave birth. So even with parents, who can find that information, it's not presented in a way that's accessible for them. So, and bear in mind at this point, I was still doing my education, doing my training. So I was like, okay, this is a book that needs to exist. I have no business writing this book. If by the time I am qualified to write this book, it still doesn't exist, I'm going to write it. There have been a few books, one in particular called Feed the Baby by Victoria Ficelli. I interviewed her for my book. There's like one or two other books that have come out, so I can't say that like I'm the first person. This is totally unique work, but there's still not nearly enough of these books out there, right?
Yeah, and it seems like you're answering questions. I mean, when I looked at everything, all the contents that were in the book, you're asking specific questions that queer and trans parents might have. So I find that very helpful.
Well, yeah, when I thought about writing a book, I thought about it in terms of the questions that I frequently get asked. And then I was just like, why don't I just write the book like a Q&A and see what, publishers think about that? And then the people at Jessica Kingsley were like, that's a great way to write a book about lactation support.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure you're getting a lot of questions all the time. I mean, I know I had a lot of questions going into this because, well, first of all, I had never heard the term chest feeding, and I feel like that's a gender neutral term. Is that why you use that term sometimes, or is there, what? Also, I would like to know the definition of lactation to begin with, just for anyone who's unclear about what that actually is. I think that's a two-part question.
Yeah. Right, so lactation, just like big picture, is making milk to feed the young of a species, right? And it's actually, lactation is why we are referred to as mammals, right? Like that, it's such an integral part of like this whole class of organism. So lactation and chest feeding are both used as like gender neutral terms, as opposed to like breastfeeding, or even using the term nursing has a lot of feminine connotations to it. There have been research studies on like how people feel about these terms, because I think for a while it was considered that like nursing was a gender neutral term, but then if you've got trans guys who are giving birth who are saying, no, that's not a gender neutral term. Like, then ipso facto, it's not. It's only gender neutral if the people it relates to think it's gender neutral. A lot of times we will just use the word lactation as a very as a neutral term. Some people don't like that because they say it feels too like clinical or like medicalized. But the term chest feeding has been really widely accepted as kind of a neutral term.
Okay. I was trying to explain to my aunt who I had a conversation with, I was trying to explain why chest feeding could possibly be a gender neutral term. And I thought, well, a lot of like queer and trans people don't have like a positive association with their breasts, so maybe they don't want to call it breastfeeding. But is there any other reason?
I think, yeah. Well, so a lot of people do have
Like dysphoria.
negative connotations or dysphoric feelings about their chest or about being referred to as having breasts, and it's one of those things where there are a lot of people who will try to argue that breast is a neutral term because, like, in clinical scenarios, cis men are sometimes referred to as having breast cancer or something like that. But in terms of culture, right, culturally, we don't generally refer to men as having breasts. And generally, if we do, as a culture, it's in a pejorative way.
Right.
So there's certainly that aspect to it as well.
Okay. Yeah. What's the most common question that you would get from like a queer or trans parent to be regarding this? Is there any questions that you get a lot?
Yeah, so just to clarify, are you referring to like a pregnant trans guy or non-binary person?
I mean, that could be a scenario. I'm sure you get a lot of questions. So let's just hypothetically say
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, because so really I've got two main groups of people I'm speaking to who are pregnant trans guys and non-binary people, and then trans women whose partners are giving birth who want to induce lactation. And those are of course two very different conversations. But yeah, so most of the questions that I get from trans guys are who either are going to give birth or are interested in giving birth are questions about top surgery. Either I've had top surgery, will that affect my ability to make milk? Or I want to have top surgery, but I also feel like I'm going to want to have babies. Like, should I postpone? Should I make it a point to have a baby before I have top surgery? And then questions about testosterone and how that can impact milk supply. Like, usually that's questions from people who have had recently given birth, because if you are pregnant, then you do have to stop taking testosterone. So the question becomes, when can I start taking testosterone again? Because they've, been off it for like upwards of 9 months, probably longer if they spent time trying to get pregnant. So you can definitely see wanting to get back on your medication. So, yeah, so to that question is actually a very easy answer, which is you can start taking testosterone again whenever you want after you've given birth, because studies have shown that the testosterone, if you're injecting testosterone, it will not not much of it will get into your milk supply, and B, what does get into the milk supply doesn't affect the baby because testosterone isn't absorbed by the stomach very well, right? That's why people inject it and use, why guys aren't just taking testosterone pills. So whatever testosterone does get into the baby just like poops out. So it's not a problem at all. The only potential problem is that testosterone might decrease your milk supply, which is what everybody just kind of assumed for a long time, that if you started taking testosterone, it would drop your milk supply. But once we started doing real research on it, it doesn't seem to. Like, it might, but then And then you can decide if it's worth it, right? Do you want to keep making milk or do you want to take your testosterone? Because you can just always stop again, you know? The question about top surgery is a lot more complicated because you have questions about like how much tissue is removed, about nipple grafts, that sort of thing. Because the hormones responsible for making milk are controlled and regulated by your pituitary gland. Your pituitary gland doesn't know if you've had top surgery or not. So if you give birth and if you're pregnant and you give birth, your body's going to make milk. It's just a question of how much and where it's going to go. So if you don't have nipples, for example, then you'll need to probably take a medication that will make you stop producing milk so you don't get difficulties there.
Oh.
If there's nowhere for the milk to be expressed from. But even if you did have your nipples removed and regrafted, you can definitely still like make milk for your child and chest feed them. Probably not like to fulfill 100% of their calorie needs, which we would call having a full supply. You're probably not going to do that. But if you're just happy to make any amount of milk for your baby, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I guess this is such an individualized thing because, yeah, last time I talked to you about it, I had that same question because I've had top surgery. But then I realized that I did have nipple grafts, but there's no hole in the nipple. So in that case, I guess the milk would have nowhere to go or it would be stopped.
Nipples tend to have more holes than you think in them. So even if like some of them are clogged from or blocked from scarring, there's probably like some way for some of the milk to come out, but also I mean if like definitely there's it's totally scarred, then yes, then you would need to need to have lactation ceased and there's a medication that people get at a hospital. I want to say it's called cabergoline, but it's one of those like prescription only things. You can't just get it from a lactation consultant. Yeah, for the most part, we think of nipples as having like a hole in them, but they tend to have like a bunch of little ones. That even if half of them are blocked from scar tissue, then you can still probably get some amount of milk out. But yeah, like I said, not enough to provide all of your baby's caloric needs. And then we start having conversations about things like formula and donor milk
Oh, yeah.
and all of that.
Yeah, that's what I would be curious about donor milk. Like, say, because I know my partner and I want to adopt a baby at some point, and we both, like, I don't think I would be able to produce enough milk, and like they are concerned about their hormones in chest feeding. So we were thinking about if we were to get donor milk, like what do you look out for when you do that? Is there certain services that provide that you can trust? Because I mean, it seems kind of a little bit scary to think like this random person out there is giving you milk, but at the same time, there could be perfectly healthy individuals that like deeply think about this that aren't like random people. Maybe they're perfectly great people. So, do you have any experience with getting donor milk?
Yeah, so there's really two like main systems for donor milk, which is are often referred to as formal milk sharing and informal milk sharing. So informal would be something like you have a friend who just gave birth who is able to give you some pumped milk, or even like friend of a friend, and again that's one of those things that's really just like very personal, and like how much do you trust individual people, like, and that's one of those things where it's more up to you and your family exactly, how you want to proceed, because there's also organizations there's one called Eats on Feets. There's one called, I want to say it's called Human Milk for Human Babies. Something very generic like that is really popular, I feel like, in the queer community, because they did, like, it seems like they very accidentally came up with an extremely inclusive name for their organization. And they all have like local chapters in different towns and cities, which you can usually find like through Facebook or Reddit and things like that. And then again, it becomes a question of like interviewing people. Do they have references, people, are they a friend of a friend or third degree, or what have you? And then you have something like formal milk sharing, where people will donate their milk to an organization, some of which very specifically give the milk to NICUs, which are neonatal ICUs. So for babies that need human milk, but their parents like either can't produce milk, or there's something going on, right? If like the parent who gave birth is having a medical event of their own, then maybe they can't provide milk for their baby. So there are milk banks that collect and pasteurize milk for those babies. But then there are other organizations which collect milk, and again, it's in order to ensure like safety, they will combine milk from 3 different sources. So even if there is like and also they do very like heavy screening. Even if there is something that got in the milk, then you have then it's diluted because it's being mixed with other sources, and then it's pasteurized, which on the one hand can that then it doesn't have it loses antibodies and kind of good bacteria and things like that, but also it makes it safer and longer shelf life. So then that's pasteurized, and then they so there's organizations that give that to hospitals, and then there are organizations that sell that to parents who need milk. The problem is that because it is such an intensive process, if you want to buy milk from one of those organizations, it usually costs about $5 an ounce. And newborns drink, it's a wide margin, but young babies will drink up to like 20 ounces a day.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So 20 times 5.
It's an extremely cost prohibitive thing. So that's why a lot of people go for the informal milk sharing. But again, that depends a lot on where you live and who your friends are and this, that, and the other thing. So
Yeah, you got to make friends with people that have babies.
Right. Right.
And then I guess they have to be producing enough milk where they're feeling like they can share it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there are some people who it's a condition called hyperlactation, where they do like produce just like way more milk than one baby would ever consume. So if you're lucky, you can meet a parent who gave birth around the same time you all have a baby, and B has hyperlactation, and then you can just get a bunch of free milk.
Yeah, that seems like a blessing and curse. I feel like someone told me that that after she had a baby, she was just producing milk nonstop, and it would be like leaking out. Maybe she had that, but it seems like it could be a blessing if you could sell the milk or gift it.
Yeah, and then that's always a part of the conversation too, right? Because on the one hand, so selling milk, very specifically not legal, because for the same reason that you can't like sell your blood or sell your kidneys, right?
Oh, right.
But when people like, it is a labor intensive thing, right? We do value this labor. So like, should we be giving people money for giving us their milk? And again, I think that also becomes a very like personal conversation, but I think one that does need to be had, right? The people should be compensated for their time and trouble, but it can feel awkward to put a price on something that many people consider priceless, so you don't want to belittle their gift by putting a price on it, but on the other hand, they put a lot of work into that.
Yeah, I didn't even realize that people don't sell it. I personally feel like it should be monetarily compensated because it's something that not everyone has, and they're sharing it. Like, you don't need to share this. But I mean, we all have value in different ways, and that person happens to have this really specific value that they're giving. But I guess that could be a whole philosophical conversation.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to ask you about was, I know that there's benefits to chest feeding in that it helps the baby feel closer to the parent, and it does gives some kind of like endorphins as well. I mean, it helps with their development. But what would you say are the benefits of chest feeding?
Yeah, so on the one hand, you do have the benefits of providing the milk, right? The parent's antibodies are going into the baby. If the parent gets sick, then the antibodies from that illness can go through the milk and into the baby, protecting the baby from the same illness, that sort of thing. And then you do have considerations like the milk is just like through millions of years of evolution, right? Like human milk is the ideal food for human babies, and then we enter into questions of like how milk changes as babies age and their protein and fat needs change. In that regard, then like being the person who is making the milk and feeding it directly from your chest is definitely like the ideal way, evolutionarily speaking, to feed a baby. However, for people who can't do that for either like physical or emotional reasons, then you can do things like the skin to skin time benefit from chest feeding is a whole different set of benefits for the baby. So then you have things like temperature regulation and just helping everybody stay calm, and the baby associating you with feeling full and cared for and loved. Like those benefits you get regardless of if the milk is coming directly from you or from a bottle, right? If you're sitting there holding your baby skin to skin, right? Like if you just have the baby in a diaper and you're not wearing a shirt, like then the baby's skin like actually touching yours, like that will that is a whole host of other benefits, right? Yeah, so I always just like to be really clear that while from an evolutionary standpoint, human milk is the ideal food for human babies, if you can't produce milk for your child for whatever reason, then it's not a zero-sum game, right? There are other benefits that your baby will get from just being with you and being fed by you. One of the things that we talked about a lot when I was in my doing my clinical hours was parents' mental health, and that if the lactation experience is really hard for you and making you feel bad for whatever reason, either gender dysphoria reasons or not, or postpartum depression or any anxiety or any other numerous reasons. If it becomes worth it to you to stop lactation, to stop chest feeding earlier than you had previously planned, like that's okay. That's part of the something that needs to become part of the equation, right? Is how are you feeling? Because if you're feeling very sad and upset every time you have to do this, then in the long run, that's not, that's not good for your baby either.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not so black and white. There's a lot of gray area to where if it's not right for you specifically to do this, there are still benefits you can gain from other aspects of it, like the skin to skin contact, for instance. But yeah, I think it's so individualized depending on what's right for that person.
And then that's something also that like multiple, once you're feeding a baby that way, like with a bottle, whether it's milk or formula, right, then other parents can participate. Whereas if it's just you feeding the baby like by directly latching, then that entire labor falls onto you. And there are definitely ways that partners can be helpful and can encourage it. But at the end of the day, you're the one who has to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to feed the baby every morning.
True.
If all of the milk is coming directly from you.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think doesn't get talked about enough is that because like so many things are individualized, that like even in the half an hour we've been talking, like how many different things have come up where we've been like, oh yeah, it's so personal, it's so individualized. It's I feel like that just really reflects the fact that like there's no one specific right way to do it, you know? Like as long as you love the baby and you're doing your best, that's the right way to do it.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like parents really get hung up on doing things the wrong way, but like for there to be a right wrong way, there needs to be like it implies that there's a specific right way to do it, and that's just not true.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that. Yeah, it seems like such a huge responsibility to have a baby in the first place, and then like anyone can do it, which is crazy. Like there's no certification for having a baby, like you can just, get pregnant and not everyone can. But it does feel like, ooh, thinking about it, like I don't want to mess up this baby's life. Like I want to do a great job and but at the same time it is a primal thing, and if you're leading with love and you just want what's best for the baby and you're using your wisdom, then you're probably going to be fine. I also appreciate that you're writing this book like as a guide for parents to have more of an inclusive approach, to know that this is for you as well. Because I think just being part of a conversation or having books and whatnot that are addressing you is so important. I mean, I know that because I've read a lot of books about like the menstrual cycle, because that's something I'm really interested in. But all those are written for like cis women. And it's like, well, non-binary people have periods as well. So I just think of this as such an important conversation that we just need language that works for people and addressing certain matters that come up with all bodies. But thank you for making this book. I feel like it's very helpful for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's for the last like 3 years, like talking about this book is my favorite thing to do. Like while I was writing it, while I was, editing it, waiting for it to be published, doing interviews and talking to like this. I love talking about this stuff. I love talking about this book. I'm actually currently trying to get another book picked up on infant care, on taking care of babies through the first 18 or 24 months. Working title for that is Baby Wrangling for the Rest of Us. But yeah, and that's written in that same kind of way, that it's never like assuming the gender of the people who have this baby, right? Like maybe one of the people reading this book gave birth, but maybe not. People get babies all sorts of ways. Maybe the baby has two parents, maybe the baby has three or four parents. Yeah, and I think we really do need more books that are written in this kind of way where we used to assume that everybody it related to was of a single gender or the same gender, and right, and now we know better. Now we know that that's not. Now we know that that's not true. Some guys menstruate, and that book also needs to be written. I am not qualified to write that book, but I would happy to write the foreword for it.
Ah, and in a way that these books are like your babies because there's this big gestation period of it developing and developing, and then you put out into the world and you're like in love with this thing that you
You
created.
want to show it to everybody.
Yeah, look what I made.
Look what I made.
Yeah, yes. Well, thank you so much for your time and for talking to me about this. Is there anything else you want to share? And also, where can people get the book?
Yeah, so the book was published through Jessica Kingsley, so it is available through major retailers. I always direct people to buy it on bookshop.org, which is an indie bookstore, online bookstore. And anybody who has questions or wants to reach out to me directly, you can find me on Instagram or my website, which I assume you can put in show notes.
Yeah, I'll put all that in show notes. I'll put a link to the book and everything.
Awesome, great, thank you so much. But yeah, like I said, this is my favorite thing to talk about. So if people have questions, don't feel weird about reaching out to me. I'm happily answer all the emails I get about this.
Amazing. Yeah, you're doing something great for the world.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I hope you liked that conversation as much as I did. Please like, comment, share with a friend. I love you dearly and I appreciate you. Bye.